it. Even if we were recycling 100% of the plastic we used, recycling itself is a process that takes energy, it takes time, it takes resources. You'd be better off not creating a lot of that plastic.
But as you say, it's ubiquitous, and we've all started thinking about it with the single-use ban,
and we've
started to notice all the plastics in our lives, haven't we?
And I feel that has been a fundamental change over this year. You know, I said to someone when I was buying some groceries, I said, it's amazing how often you don't need a plastic bag, when I would have always once taken one.
Yeah.
So hopefully people's thinking is changing and it will influence our behaviour. But I mean, there's definitely a long way to go. As Bernard said, you go into a supermarket, you think you'll avoid a plastic bag, but it doesn't take the plastic off every single item that you've bought.
Speaking of a long way to go, 6.4%, the percentage of female executive directors within the FTSE 250 companies. That sounds low, actually.
That is low. It's actually a little bit lower than New Zealand, but not that much lower. We are very poor in the New Zealand Stock Exchange and more broadly, particularly in private business, at having women directors and CEOs. It's better in the public service. It's just got over 50%, the number of women CEOs in the public service, but it's very low in private business. And a lot of fund managers and others are now starting to challenge this and say, actually, businesses that are more diverse are actually more successful businesses in the long run.
Indeed. I mean, and you can look on the bright side and say at least our plastic recycling is better than our gender equity.
Yeah, marginally. McVitie's, they make hobnob biscuits. 16.7 is the percentage reduction of the number of Jaffa cakes in the McVitie's Christmas tube. There aren't as many anymore. 40% Russian men who do not live to the age of 65. That is, pardon the pun, a sobering statistic.
Vodka.
And $1.3 billion, the amount lost from the value of Snapchat within a day after Kylie Jenner tweeted, "So, does anyone else not open Snapchat anymore?"
She should have monetised that. She should have said, if I tweet this and it costs $1.4 billion, how about you pay me $3 million and save yourself $1.4 billion? What a deal. I would have suggested that.
It's the phenomenal power of
I would have suggested she sold all her Snapchat shares and then shorted it by...
Well, so I think about business models for news a lot, actually. And in China, there are a bunch of journalists who never publish anything. All they do is investigate dodgy situations with business leaders, write a fantastic story, hand it over to the business leader and say, I have another copy of this. Would you like me to publish this? And the business leader says, oh, no. Well, the cost is $200,000.
See, and this is they've got a sustainable journalism model.
Exactly.
Everyone is just determined.
Extortion is fantastic as a business model for journalism.
I'm just writing down ways to make money.
As a journalist, I'm not all bad.
And just finally, a stuff story today on how we don't want the open road speed limit brought down to 80 k's an hour, even though it would save lives. And of course, it saves more lives the lower you go. The slower you go, and it's politically unpalatable to try and do it. Do you agree with keeping the 100k limit as 100k?
I actually think lower speed limits are good, and I don't care if they get lowered because
I'm on a scooter.
Yeah, that's right. Lower the better. 29 kilometres an hour. That's the limit of my scooter. Everyone else should be on the same level.
Bernard Hickey has been on the panel today, but will now scooter away from RNZ House. Thank you, Bernard.
Cheers.
Nice to see you. And Joe McCarroll has been with us. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Jim.
We're back with our last regular panel of the year tomorrow and our Christmas special on Monday, of course. And Checkpoint with Lisa is on the way.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. You're listening to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's program, the country's top cop on the belittling, inappropriate, unprofessional and humiliating behaviour of Deputy Commissioner Wally Homaha. So has Mr Homaha been told to pull up his socks? Is that all, and is that enough? Transport accident investigators released their initial findings on what caused the two helicopter crashes that claimed the lives of the Wallace brothers and two dock workers. The shake-up at Southern Response, the government-owned quake insurer. We talked to Minister Megan Woods, and some of our toughest inmates are playing Santa this Christmas. You can catch us on Facebook or watch on Face TV Sky Channel 83. Time for the news.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The helicopter crash that killed pilot Nick Wallace and 2 Department of Conservation workers appears to have been caused by a pair of overtrousers flying out of the cabin and wrapping around the tail rotor. The Transport Accident Investigation Commission today released its interim report into the crash, which killed Mr Wallace and dock workers Paul Honderlink and Scott Theobald in October, and another that killed his brother Matthew in July. Chief Commissioner Jane Mears says since October's crash, it's emerged there have been several incidents of doors on the Hughes helicopter opening during flight, which were not reported as they were meant to be.
Evidence has also revealed 3 incidents in the month prior to the accident in which the doors on the accident helicopter opened in flight. Effective safety management depends on such incidents being reported to the operator and investigated, but none of these occurrences was recorded in the operator's incident reporting system.
Jane Mears says the investigations into both crashes are ongoing. The authority hasn't come to a conclusion about what caused the first crash, but there's evidence mast bumping occurred at some point. A spokesperson for the Wallace family says the findings of the report are very disturbing. The Deputy Commissioner of Police, Wally Homaha, remains in his job despite a report finding he belittled and humiliated staff. An investigation by the Independent Police Conduct Authority says the behaviour happened on a joint project with Justice and Corrections 2 years ago. Here's political reporter Gia Garrick.
The report also finds Mr Homaha spread information to discredit one of the complainants and solicited colleagues to back him. But it's not enough to sack him, says the legal advice to the Prime Minister, as the behaviour doesn't add up to the definition of bullying under the law. Jacinda Ardern is following that advice, despite calls from National for her to ignore it and get rid of him. Instead, she says she wants the police to follow this up as an employment matter. From Parliament, Gia Garrick.
The police have broken up a protest over water outside the Canterbury Regional Council in central Christchurch. 5 people have been arrested for disorderly behaviour by 10 police officers after they refused to move off 2 water mains on Tuam Street. The group, the Extinction Rebellion Otutahi, which was made up of about 20 protesters, and switched off the primary and backup mains which provide water to the regional council. A spokesperson, Rowan Brooks, says they're unhappy with how the council has been monitoring and looking after the region's water. The water has been switched back on. There are reports that Japan is to withdraw from the International Whaling Commission in a bid to resume commercial whaling. Citing government sources, Japan's Kyodo news agency says the move is planned for next year and will be announced by the end of this year. The BBC's Kat Wiener has more.
In September, Japan launched a controversial bid to ease the moratorium on commercial whaling imposed by the IWC more than 30 years ago. But its argument that whale stocks had recovered sufficiently to justify the resumption of sustainable hunting was voted down. That seems to have paved the way for this decision. According to the Kyodo news agency, Tokyo would only allow whaling in the seas around Japan and not stray into Antarctic waters.
Kat Wiener. The country's largest agricultural trainer has gone into liquidation, affecting more than 2,500 students and 250 staff. Taratahi Institute of Agriculture, which owns and manages 8 farms and has 11 campuses throughout the country, was due to celebrate its centenary next year. Its chair, Mavis Mullins, says their main concerns are for students, staff, animal welfare, creditors and partners. The Wairarapa-based institution has been hit hard by declining student numbers, which hit its income. A convicted child sex offender who cut off his bracelet before going on the run for 3 weeks has been jailed for just over a year. Darren Albert Jolly appeared in the Auckland District Court this afternoon after pleading guilty to breaching his extended supervision order and unlawfully taking a motor vehicle. Jolly, who has 133 convictions, including sexual offending against children, has been living under strict conditions since 2012. He fled Auckland in September after stealing a car from a Mount Wellington dealership and was arrested in Westport 3 weeks later. This afternoon, Judge Claire Ryan said Jolly maintained a high sense of entitlement, adding he felt victimised by conditions he considered too restrictive. A Waikato woman drove with her family to Auckland to get a Christmas food parcel. The Auckland City Mission has had to turn away hundreds of families lining up for the parcels as it grapples with record demand. That's despite it doubling its effort. Bella Putu, who travelled from Huntly for a parcel, says she came earlier in the week but was turned away. Bella says there isn't a Christmas food parcel service in Waikato, so she's forced to drive to Auckland.
Long drives, a lot of money wasted on, well, not wasted on gas, because we actually got in today, but you know, they didn't take us on Tuesday.
Bella Putu says the parcel will take away a lot of stress. A person is dead after apparently falling from a vehicle in Whangarei. The police were called to Whareora Road just before 4 o'clock. The street is closed for now between Clapham and Abbey Caves Road. An earlier crash this afternoon in Whangarei, a motorcyclist is in hospital after colliding with a car in First Avenue. It's 5 minutes past 5. Sport, the New Zealand rally driver Hayden Paddon says his dumping from Hyundai for next year's World Rally Championship came as a surprise and showed that no matter how he'd performed this season, he was going to get the chop. The Geraldine native raced in 7 of 13 events for Hyundai this year, and he was confident he'd done enough to earn a gig next year after finishing second in Australia last month, a result which put him 8th in the Drivers' Championship. However, Paddon was dropped last week with 9-time WRC champion Sebastian Loeb joining the team in his place. Paddon wants to race in the WRC again, but he concedes that may not happen.
It's sort of come to our realisation of recent that a lot of it's out of your control. You know, we had what I thought was a reasonably good season this year. We did what the team was asking us to do throughout the year, and we end up without a seat. Obviously, we're taking the opportunities if they arise, but it's also time to focus and push forward on things that we can control and certainly try and get back there again.
Hayden Paddon. Cronulla Sharks captain Paul Gallen will fight former 2-time Australian heavyweight boxing champion John Hopoate in Sydney next February. The former New South Wales skipper Gallen has an 8-0 record, while ex-NRL star Hopoate, who hasn't fought since March 2010, has a 12-5 log. That's the news.
Discovering the Deputy Police Commissioner's conduct.
I think it indicates that Mr Homaha was a bad appointment and he should be dismissed by the Prime Minister.
Uncovering the truth about the use of private eyes.
I was aware that they had engaged private investigators to try and find out just how serious the death threats were and the threats of other damage.
And recovering an ancient shipwreck.
The sand had been sucked away and we're starting to see the top planks of the hull shape and thought, my God, this thing's pretty important.
Important, if not always pretty. Morning Report with Susie Ferguson and Guy Aspinall, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to Noon's Christmas special, our regular commentators and comedians look back on the highlights of the year. And after 10, 18-year-old Thomasin Harcourt Mackenzie, tipped for an Oscar nomination for her role in Leave No Trace. Join me, Catherine Ryan, as we say haere rā to 2018 on 9 to Noon on RNZ National.
And Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, a few showers, possibly heavy this evening and overnight. Waikato to Kapiti, including the central high country, also Bay of Plenty, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Showers, some heavy and possibly thundery this afternoon and evening, especially about the ranges. Showers clearing overnight but returning tomorrow afternoon, possibly heavy in the west in the evening. Wairarapa and Wellington, a few showers clearing tomorrow morning but returning in the evening, possibly heavy in Wellington. For Buller and Nelson, a few showers mainly about the ranges, possibly heavy tomorrow afternoon and evening. For Westland and Fiordland, mainly fine, isolated showers inland, becoming widespread for a time tomorrow, possibly heavy in northern Westland. Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland, patchy rain, gradually clearing today. Showers tomorrow, some heavy and possibly thundery from afternoon, especially inland. And for the Chatham Islands, rain with heavy falls from this evening, easing to a few showers tomorrow afternoon. It's 9 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina, and I'm Lisa Owen. We'll be with you for the next hour. The country's number 2 cop behaved inappropriately and unprofessionally. The police watchdog found that Deputy Police Commissioner Wally Homaha belittled staff from 2 government departments. It also says he acted improperly by approaching several people to help when he became aware the bullying allegations were about to be made public. And that's found no favour with the Prime Minister. But Jacinda Ardern says his behaviour does not meet the threshold for him to be removed as Deputy Commissioner, but has made her disappointment in those findings clear. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
This is the second report in as many months into Wally Homaha, and he's survived both. In November, a review of the process under which he was appointed Deputy Commissioner concluded it was sound. Now the Independent Police Conduct Authority has found while he hadn't technically bullied anyone under WorkSafe guidelines, his behaviour was inappropriate and unprofessional for a senior executive. It described Mr Homaha's response to one team member as belittling and humiliating, and his general approach to the group as unnecessarily autocratic. He approached staff seeking personal support, which the report found put them in a difficult position. The report also said Mr Homaha was likely trying to discredit a member of a joint ministry and corrections project in 2016 by sharing information about them. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says, on advice from the Solicitor General, he'll keep his job.
There is inappropriate behaviour here, and for me that is not acceptable. But the threshold that needs to be met for Mr Homaha's removal from the job has not been met. I have sent a very clear message to the Commissioner of Police. I expect him to work alongside Mr Homaha to lift his professional behaviour and to meet my expectations.
Nationals Police spokesperson Chris Bishop says the Prime Minister is dancing on the head of a pin.
The report does note that it meets the colloquial definition of bullying. It found that he was belittling, it found that he was humiliating, it found that he was intimidating, it found that he acted inappropriately and unprofessionally. It's just not tenable that the second top police person in the country can exhibit that sort of behaviour and stay in the job.
Ms Ardern says there are broader considerations.
For me, I have to follow the advice that has been given to me. I see that as being incredibly important because we need to maintain that independence between the police and the state.
While the Police Commissioner has responsibility for matters of general conduct and employment relating to the Deputy Commissioner, ultimately it's up to the Prime Minister whether or not he stays in the job. Chris Bishop says Jacinda Ardern should use that power and remove him.
She has solid grounds to do so. She has a report from the independent watchdog into the police that says he belittled staff, he humiliated them, he was intimidating towards them, he circulated information about complainants to discredit them, and he sought support inappropriately from people who he worked for while he was under investigation. She has all the grounds that she needs.
From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
A short time ago, I spoke to Police Commissioner Mike Bush about the IPCA report. I asked him what he thought of Wally Homaha's behaviour.
The first thing is that we accept the findings of the IPCA report as we accept the findings of Mary Sholton's QC report of several months ago. It raises issues that as Commissioner I take seriously, and I want to assure people that I will be taking them seriously, taking action and ensuring that there is a plan in place for the future.
What do you think of his behaviour?
So that's been well commented on by the IPCA report.
I'm asking you, as the top police officer in the country, what do you think of his behaviour?
I think it raises issues, which I just mentioned, and that we need to ensure that, like all members of my executive, we absolutely live the values of the organisation, which the public should absolutely expect from us. My expectations on behalf of the communities we serve will be made very clear, have been made clear again today, and I'll be ensuring that they are adhered to.
So what issues of concern do they raise for you?
So you've seen the wording inside the report. I want to ensure that no one ever feels the need to make those sort of suggestions or complaints again, that we act with absolute professionalism, that we act with absolute respect, that we have absolute empathy, and again, that we live the values of our organisation. They are the expectations I have of everyone, but especially the senior leadership of our organisation.
OK, your police website details your core values: professionalism, treating people with dignity in the way that you would want to be treated, integrity, upholding excellent ethical standards, empathy, considering the experience of others. How did Wally Homaha score against those objectives in the way that he treated these people?
Yes, again, I think that's well commented on in the IPCA report.
Commissioner, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I am asking you what you think here. You've had this report, you've had a chance to look at it. How would you characterise the behaviour against the standards that are set for your officers?
Yeah, no, it's a very fair question, Lisa, and as I've said, I accept the findings inside that report.
So how did he score against those core values?
My commitment to the public is to ensure that, again, everyone meets those standards, those very high standards that we set for ourselves, and I'll be making sure that does occur.
With respect, you're not answering my question, Commissioner. So, did he meet the professionalism and treating people with dignity standard? Did he meet that?
Well, I think that's well addressed inside the report, Lisa.
Did he meet that standard?
Again, that's what the report's about. It's addressed.
I'm asking your views, and I'm wondering why you're so reluctant to verbalise exactly what happened here. You're not trying to minimise the situation, are you?
I'm absolutely accepting of that report, and it's my job to ensure, again, that everyone in our organisation upholds those values that you have so well articulated.
So do you think he upheld those values in his actions that have been contained in this report? Did he meet those values, in your view?
There are words inside there that would say no, and that's what we're addressing.
What words are those? What words are those specifically?
Well, you've read the report.
No, I'm asking you. What words do you think highlight the problems?
Look, it's well traversed inside there. That's what we're talking about. That's what we are dealing with here and now. And as I say, we'll be dealing with them seriously, and I've set clear expectations.
Can you understand how people may question whether you are going to make these expectations clear when you find it difficult to even articulate the things that he did?
It's there in black and white, Lisa.
So are you referring to the words exhibited intimidating and humiliating behaviour? His behaviour constituted bullying in the common sense of the word. He was unprofessional and inappropriate. And actually he tried to discredit the character of someone else by strong-arming people within the force and other places to write references for him. So, as the Commissioner, what do you make of that behaviour?
I can only say this one more time, that I accept what's in that report. It's a lengthy report.
Have you had a conversation with him?
Yes, we spoke this afternoon.
What exactly did you say to him?
I outlined, and at the risk of repeating myself, clear expectations of my expectations of him, along with all the members of the organisation, and that we will work very closely to ensure that they are upheld.
Did you tell him explicitly not to bully people?
We talked about a range of expectations. We spoke about the values, and again, I don't want to repeat them because you've articulated them very well, but that's what we are committed to. That's what the public should expect. And that's what we hold ourselves to account on.
How does his style and the style that he exhibited in dealing with these people fit with current expectations of policing, modern-day policing?
Yeah, look, our organisation's come a very, very long way in quite a short space of time, but we have to make sure we maintain that, and that's what people should fairly expect.
Do you retain confidence in Wally Homaha as Deputy Commissioner?
I said at Select Committee I did, and I confirm that today. I have absolute confidence. He's been leading a team that have been doing excellent work in terms of ensuring that we have better justice outcomes or outcomes for Māori inside the justice system. We have to keep a focus on that work. It's critically important to all New Zealanders.
But how can you have confidence in him when he's behaved in this way?
So I have said again that I have confidence in his ability. I know he has listened to what I've had to say.
So did he give you a guarantee that he's not going to be aggressive, intimidating or bullying again?
Deputy Commissioner Homaha has given me his word, his commitment to upholding our values.
Isn't he tainted goods now, though?
No, I'm not even going to answer that question, Lisa.
Well, there's significant issues raised in this report. He is a high-ranking police officer. He is your 2IC. Do you not expect a higher standard of behaviour from someone in that position? And how can we trust that we're going to get that from him?
Yes, you should expect the highest levels of behaviour, the highest performance from the senior members of the police. And that's what I'm committing to ensure happens.
This is not the first time that issues have been raised about his attitude. Obviously, Louise Nicholas, the rape complainant, now turned educator, raised some serious concerns about Wally Homaha's attitudes. And this complaint and the findings of this report seem to mirror the kind of behaviour that she was concerned about. Do you think it does mirror the concerns she raised?
Look, I think those matters were well addressed in the government report headed up by Mary Sholton's QC.
No, they weren't. And the inquiry result today, the inquiry findings today, say they weren't traversed in full in the same way that these issues have been dealt with in this report. So, Louise Nicholas's concerns about Wally Homaha's attitudes and behaviours seem to have been borne out by the findings of this investigation, don't you think?
Well, I think between the two reports they have addressed all of those matters. Mary Sholton's QC report was accepted absolutely as this report is, and I can, and rightly so, give a commitment to the public of New Zealand that I will ensure that all of our people, including our most senior leadership, will be high-performing professional leaders inside the organisation, and it's my job to make that happen.
Has any employment action been taken against Wally Homaha? Is there any mark on his record as a result of this, or is that just a conversation with you?
Look, the reports will exist forever, obviously. But in terms of the findings from that report, they set clear expectations, raise issues, and they will be managed through a plan that I put in place with Deputy Commissioner Homaha to ensure that he, like everyone else, upholds the highest standards.
So no formal action?
That's
on his record?
Come from. Well, this report will always be public.
Aside from that, Commissioner, you are not taking any other action in relation to Wally Homaha, just a conversation asking him to pull his socks up?
It's a lot more than a conversation. It's a plan that I will be strictly monitoring to give the confidence to the public that we will lead the most professional organisation.
And that was the Police Commissioner, Mike Bush. We would love your opinion on this. You can text us on 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us, Checkpoint, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. As Wanaka's Wallace family prepares for their first Christmas following the death of brothers Matthew and Nick, the Transport Accident Investigator has released its interim reports into the crashes which took their lives. Matthew Wallace was killed when the Robinson he was piloting plummeted into Lake Wanaka in July. His younger brother Nick died alongside two Department of Conservation workers when the Hughes helicopter he was piloting crashed shortly after takeoff in October. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown has been reading the reports.
The two Wallace boys were from a tight-knit family of 4 brothers and piloted helicopters owned by the family's business. The Commission's interim reports don't make any findings on the crashes, but provide the first insights into what happened.
The first accident saw a Robinson R-44 helicopter crash into the Stevenson's Arm area of Lake Wanaka on the 21st of July this year, and in the second, a Hughes helicopter crashed into the ground near Wanaka Airport on the 18th of October.
That's Chief Commissioner Jane Mears. She says there's evidence that during the first crash, the Robinson piloted by Matthew experienced mast bumping, contact between an inner part of the rotor and the main drive shaft, before it crashed into Lake Wanaka. The rotor blade may also have entered the cabin during the fatal flight, damaging flight instruments.
The evidence shows that the teeter stops for both blades were crushed, which indicates that the helicopter experienced mast bumping at some point in the accident sequence. And there's also evidence that the main rotor blade has struck and entered the cabin in flight. There are score marks on the blade that match screws on the canopy bow, and there are scoured paint on the screws.
Jane Mears says it is too early to say if the mast bumping contributed to the crash, but the Commission's Chief Investigator of Accidents, Captain Tim Burford, says mast bumping is known to be prevalent in Robinsons, so much so the Commission has asked the company to investigate further testing of the issue. That testing is ongoing, though the problem is not limited to only Robinsons.
The Robinson helicopters in New Zealand, there's a high rate of mast bumping problems, and that's been itemised in our watch list. There are other kinds of helicopters that are also susceptible to mast bumping, so it is not just Robinson helicopters.
Jane Mears says the crash which killed Nick Wallace, along with dock workers Paul Honderlink and Scott Theobald, appears to have been caused by a pair of over-trousers flying out of the cabin and wrapping around the tail rotor. Since the crash, it has emerged there have been several incidents of doors on the helicopter opening during flight, which were not reported as they were meant to be.
Evidence has also revealed 3 incidents in the month prior to the accident in which the doors on the accident helicopter opened in flight. Effective safety management depends on such incidents being reported to the operator and investigated, but none of these occurrences was recorded in the operator's incident reporting system.
The investigation into the crash is ongoing, but evidence suggests the left door of the helicopter opened during the fatal flight. In a statement, Jonathan Wallace, older brother of Matthew and Nick, said the Alpine Group is cooperating fully with investigators. He characterised the apparent break-up of the Robinson R44 as disturbing and says the unexplained door separation of the Hughes is equally of concern. The Department of Conservation will not comment while the investigations are ongoing. Retired helicopter pilot Dennis Laird says while he cannot comment on the interim reports, New Zealand's helicopter accident rate is too high.
Yesterday, the Director of Civil Aviation, in a weekly update, commented particularly on the helicopter industry and the accident rate and where that fits compared with other industry. And I think it's something like 75 times the average accident rate, albeit it's a high-risk industry.
The investigations into both crashes remain open, and the Commission says its final findings may differ from what has been released in today's interim reports. In Otago, for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
Christchurch Regeneration Minister Megan Woods expects disgraced insurer Southern Response to settle the claims on its books by the end of next year. A report into the use of private investigators by state agencies found Southern Response had used the company Thompson & Clark to spy on claimants, and it had made potentially illegal recordings the police are now investigating. Alistair James, a former Christchurch councillor and former chair of the Health Board, will replace Ross Butler as the chair of Southern Response after Mr Butler resigned on Tuesday. I asked the Minister, Megan Woods, a short time ago why she chose Mr James.
Alistair's a widely respected lawyer and director here in Christchurch. His own home was destroyed in the earthquakes and had to rebuild his home. He is an empathetic person. He understands that at the heart of all of the 500-odd unresolved Southern Response claims, there lies people and their need to get their lives back on track.
Yeah, when did you talk to him? It's a pretty quick appointment, so when was the first conversation you had with him about this?
I talked with Alistair on Tuesday.
Were you thinking that you were probably going to need a replacement before that?
No, I had not talked to anyone prior to Tuesday about this.
So why an interim appointment?
Oh, that's very simply because the year has finished up in terms of cabinet processes. There's a normal process that you go through with Treasury interviewing people, that you go through a selection, they interview a range of people, but obviously there just wasn't time to do that in this case. So this is an interim appointment that we could get ministers with power to act to sign off. So what that means, he's appointed through to June. That means we'll be able to go through a full process in the new year.
What about the other board members? Because they're all foundation board members. So the chair has gone, yes, but you've got 2 other board members who were there during all of this shenanigans that were going on. So why keep them?
Well, there's actually only 2 other board members that are still there, so we're down to sort of a very small board now. One of the things that I had to be very careful about was the fact that we're in a wind-down phase with Southern Response. We certainly couldn't be in a position of not having any of the knowledge that is set around that table. A whole new board is not something that would have been the best way to settle the claims. The focus for me now is that there's 539 claims that still need to be settled at Southern Response. What do we have to have in place to make sure that we can get those claims settled as quickly as possible?
But is replacing one man enough to restore confidence in Southern Response?
Look, I think one of the key things is it's not just one man. There's been a huge turnover, particularly in the senior management at Southern Response since the activities were taking place. The chief executive is no longer there. There is already a new chief executive in place. That what we have to do now is make sure I have made it abundantly clear to the board and to the management that this is not something that I will tolerate. And that this is not the way that claimants are to be treated, and that they are to be treated with respect, and that the focus has to be on getting those claims settled and doing it in a way that is fair to everybody. In fact, one of the things when we set up the new claims resolution service here in Christchurch that Southern Response are part of the charter that we've got up in that organisation is that claimants will be treated with respect.
As you pointed out, this is a twilight organisation, so how many years left is there in this entity?
Well, the company's already begun the process of winding down. We've got 539 claims that are still live there. It's winding down its operations with a view to have effective operational closure sometime probably in the next calendar year, in 2019, but we'll have to track the claims and see where they're going. But the downsiding has to occur in stages. And the legal entity that is Southern Response obviously will have to continue for years to ensure that its obligations to policyholders are fully discharged. But in terms of the shop front for people, that I would like to think that we've got 539 claims remaining. In 2018 we settled 542. I'd like to think that within this time next year that we'd be looking very close to a zero number there.
What consideration, Minister, I'm interested if you gave any consideration into doing something like absorbing Southern Response into another agency, like making it an add-on to the Earthquake Commission or something similar?
Well, one of the things that's already happened this year, Lisa, is that we've set up the Greater Christchurch Claims Resolution Service, which is where EQC and Southern Response, with community law and some other people, basically provided a shop front for people to walk in and be able to have their claims settled. So in some ways we're already seeing the evolution of some of those other options for people to go through. What I want to do is make sure that we have absolutely the right processes in place to make sure that we are providing the fastest pathway for resolving claims, because that is the most important thing. There's still 539 claims. There's 539 people and families that haven't got hope back in their lives, that we have to make sure that we've got a clear pathway for them. But look, we'll be looking at options. As I said, that this
so you're not ruling something like that out then, if you're still looking at options?
No, look, as I said, the wind down has already begun.
Okay, so one of the core issues here is about the politicising of the state service. So can you tell us what you know about how much the then Minister, Jerry Brownlee, knew about Southern Response using Thompson and Clark?
Well, I know when I asked Mr Brownlee, when he was the Minister back in 2016, about the use of private investigators at Southern Response, that he sent me a reply that said they were using Thompson and Clark, as well as a couple of other organisations that were named in that reply. So he knew that they were being used. He said it was for the purposes of staff safety, but he certainly knew that Thompson and Clark were engaged.
There are emails and correspondence that has been released basically under the Official Information Act following this inquiry. There are emails between Linda Fellwasser, who was the communications person for Southern Response, to a senior press secretary in Jerry Brownlee's office. The dates around that are mid-2015. Now, this is important because the inquiry found that the comms department at Southern Response managed Thompson and Clark on a daily basis. Are you concerned that unethical behaviour by Southern Response and Thompson and Clark was known about, if not condoned, known about by the Minister's office?
Oh, look, if that is the case, of course I would be concerned. I've demonstrated through my own actions that I take this kind of behaviour really seriously. I've said it is absolutely the responsibility to protect staff, but when it morphs into something else, it's not something that I can condone or tolerate. But they are really questions for Mr Brownlee.
Well, is more investigation required around that?
Look, I think that by anyone's measure, the State Services Commission's report is pretty thorough. I don't think there's a lot of stones that have been left unturned. I haven't seen the emails you're referring to. Were they part of the document release that came through?
Document release.
So they would have been looked at but by the investigators who wrote the report. But certainly if there's some issues that are still live, we can certainly ask the State Services Commission to confirm that they were looked at as part of the investigation.
Coming up, 2,000 American troops are being withdrawn from Syria. Only a Christmas miracle will prevent more families leaving the Auckland City mission empty-handed tomorrow. And inmates at the country's toughest jail spruce up bikes for needy children this Christmas. But first, here's Katrina with the headlines.
It appears the helicopter crash that killed pilot Nick Wallace and 2 dock workers was caused by a pair of trousers flying out of the helicopter and getting tangled up in the tail rotor. The Chief Commissioner of the Transport Accident Investigation Commission says since the October crash, it's emerged several incidents of doors on the Hughes helicopter had opened during flight. She says these were not reported as they were meant to be. The Deputy Police Commissioner Wally Homaha has survived a report finding he belittled and humiliated staff. The report has also found he spread information to discredit one of the complainants. The Prime Minister says his behaviour doesn't add up to bullying under the law and he can stay in the job despite National's call for her to get rid of him. 5 people have been arrested after a protest over water outside the Canterbury Regional Council in central Christchurch. The arrests were for disorderly behaviour when the 20 protesters refused to move off 2 water mains. The group, which calls itself the Extinction Rebellion Ōtautahi, switched off the primary and backup mains which provide water to the council. Japan is reported to be withdrawing from the International Whaling Commission so that it can resume commercial whaling. The BBC reports in its controversial bid, Japan argues that whale stocks have recovered enough to justify sustainable hunting. It said it would restrict its whaling to the waters around Japan and not stray into Antarctic waters. The plan is moved for next year. Flights at London's Gatwick Airport have now resumed after a 6-hour delay sparked by reports of 2 drones flying close to the runway. Gatwick is Britain's second busiest airport. The delay caused major disruption as planes were grounded or diverted. The airport has apologised to disrupted passengers on Twitter. Those are the headlines. More news and weather at 6.
Great, can't wait. Thanks, Katrina. The economy grew at its slowest rate in nearly 5 years last quarter on the back of softer construction and manufacturing. Official figures show gross domestic product, the broad measure of the economy, expanded 0.3% in the 3 months ended September. Here's business editor Giles Beckford.
No one expected the economy to grow at the 1% rate of the previous quarter, but this is half of what was being forecast and the weakest 3-month spell since late 2013. And then to the big Kaikoura quake-related repair work hit construction activity. Manufacturing was softer, government spending didn't give much of a lift, and business investment was easing. ASB Chief Economist Nick Tuffley says the economy had a dose of the midwinter blues.
Over Q3, that's where we saw petrol prices climb very dramatically, and it's also where we saw business confidence slipping as well.
Certainly, petrol prices at record highs in some areas dampened consumer spending, and a weaker New Zealand dollar made imports more expensive and less tempting. The head of Briscoe's group, Rod Duke, says shoppers have been spending, but it's been very patchy.
You'll get your budgets for the first couple of days, then you'll miss them for a couple of days. We think it's probably a combination of some of the households in and around Auckland being stressed in terms of discretionary spending, and some seasonally damp and not particularly warm weather.
The construction boom has been a big driver of growth in recent years, what with major infrastructure projects and repairs to damage caused by the 2016 Kaikoura earthquake. But a lot of that work has come to an end, and so too has the demand, the production and the wages that went with it. The head of the Contractors Federation, Peter Silcock, says major roading projects are also wrapping up, with few new ones starting up.
Largely, I think the government is still in a planning phase of its public transport development and things like that. So, yeah, there is a little bit of a slowdown, and we're anticipating that slowdown may get worse as we go into 2019.
But 1 weak quarter does not make a recession. Annual growth is 2.6%, and that still beats most of the world. ASB's Nick Tuffley thinks the soft spot is temporary, and there are already signs of better growth.
We're starting to see some tentative signs that there is some turnaround. So we've seen business confidence start to pick up, although it's still at worryingly low levels. And encouragingly, in the electronic cards spending, you can see signs that discretionary spending is starting to recover a bit.
Nick Tuffley says the world economic outlook has more than its share of risks, which he thinks will keep the Reserve Bank watching, waiting and worrying, but keeping its key interest rate on hold at a record low well into 2020. For Checkpoint, this is Giles Beckford.
And in a double dose of business, Nona Peltier joins me, looking resplendent in Christmas red.
There you go.
Nona, love it or hate it, IKEA is on the way to New Zealand, yeah?
Apparently so, yes indeed. The company has said that they have one of their franchisees, a company called Inca, who specializes in this part of the world. There's 11 franchisees. I didn't realize that. There's quite a few around the world. So they investigate different markets, and now they have permission to come to New Zealand and investigate the possibility of opening here. Now, you'd have to assume, of course, they're going to. They're going to do some market research, though, and look at a few options. There's going to be a lot of things for them to consider before they decide where and when they open here.
And so, well, you've been speaking to Massey University Centre for Retail
Actually,
Studies.
That's right. My colleague is, in fact,
okay.
Kim Savage. She was speaking to him earlier today, and we have a little bit from Jonathan Elms. He's the director at the Massey University Business School dealing with retail. So this is what he had to say.
The speculation's all around somewhere in Auckland, and that could be somewhere on the North Shore, given the demographic of those who live around there. Somewhere in the south of Auckland, because there's more land available. And it could even be halfway between, say, Hamilton and Auckland, to really, bring these two cities together as a result of this particular, well-known large operator. The second could be talent. It could be getting the right employees to help them get the store off the ground and to help them to successfully run it. There's a huge talent gap of experienced retailers in New Zealand, and with a new player coming in, that could become even more pronounced and potentially problematic for IKEA itself.
Well, there you go. And that was Jonathan Elms. He's the director at the Massey University School dealing with retail studies. So there you go. Labour issues could be an issue for IKEA because, we've been talking about labour shortages all through the year, and here's another potential issue arising in the retail sector this time. So what do we have? Yeah, now look, the Kiwi dollar fell a little bit on that economic news that Giles Beckford was referring to earlier. That was the GDP numbers. They were lower than people were expecting. So yeah, we did get a bit of a reaction there. But the real big thing was the U.S. Federal Reserve. They indicated they would not have as many rate rises next year in terms of interest rates, but it was still a lot more hawkish than people were expecting. And that caused the New Zealand dollar to fall about 1.2% overnight. So we fell a little bit more again this afternoon. We were at 67.4 US cents, 94.8 Australian, and 53.4 pence. Now, on the market front, there's still a lot of unease. None of these economic indicators are making people feel very comfortable. So our top 50 index, we finished in positive territory. 10 points. We had been stronger earlier in the day. So we finished at 8,772. Now you compare that to the Australian 200 index just around the same time, around 5 p.m. this afternoon, and they were down more than 0.5%. So you would expect to see more of this probably as the day goes through.
Thanks, Nona. Hey, and by the way, happy birthday. We'd sing it to you, but this is Radio New Zealand and we can't afford the rights.
So perhaps you can't sing.
And that too. Okay. The Auckland City Missioner says unless there's a miracle, more families lining up for Christmas food parcels will leave empty-handed tomorrow. Hundreds of people queuing at 3 sites in Auckland have been turned away as the mission grapples with record demand. And it's not just Auckland struggling to help everyone in need. Katie Scotcher reports.
Trolleys of cardboard boxes filled with Christmas dinner staples, presents and the occasional bok choy flew through Eden Park this morning. More than 200 people were waiting for their Christmas parcel to be allocated. Many of them, some who came from as far as Northland and Waikato, queued outside the building in the rain overnight. Among them Bella Putu and her mother, brother and niece. They travelled from Huntly earlier in the week, but were turned away as there were not enough parcels to go around. They returned in the early hours of this morning, joining the queue from 4 a.m.
Long drives, a lot of money wasted, well not wasted on gas because we actually got in today, but you know, they didn't take us on Tuesday.
They travelled to Auckland for Christmas food parcels last year too.
That was awesome, yes, because at that time me and my husband had lost our jobs and it was really hard last year, so my sister-in-law came down from Auckland and picked me up and brought me all the way to the City Mission, and it made a big help last year, and this year it's even better.
Bella says the food and gifts her family received take away a lot of stress.
It's just been struggle, but doing something like this, maybe they should bring it to down the Waikato somewhere or something so that, you know, we can all share it all.
The City Mission is running 3 Christmas drives in Auckland this year, at Eden Park, Ngā Whare Marae and Papakura Marae. More than 600 people have been turned away in the last 2 days as supply can't keep up with demand. Ngā Whare Marae and Mangere had run out of its 200 allocated food parcels by 3 this morning. The Marae's coordinator for the Auckland City Mission's Christmas drive, Veronica Henare, says they have no other option but to turn people away.
We wish that we could give to everyone that comes to our marae, but we can't. We only have sufficient supplies each day for up to 200 whānau to come through.
Trays of food, including mangoes, apples and eggs, have been donated to the City Mission by members of the public and businesses. And this morning, Pack and Save donated $15,000 to the charity. But Auckland City Missioner Chris Farrelly says they still won't be able to help everyone.
Tomorrow morning, I'm going yet again onto the line at Eden Park, and I know I'm going to have to look people in the eye and say, I'm sorry, you've come all this way, you've waited all night, but we can't do what you would like today.
In Hamilton, the Salvation Army has helped just under 200 families this Christmas. Captain Jenny Collings says that's 28% more than last year.
Cost of living compared to what is coming into the household just makes things quite desperate.
The Christchurch City Missioner, Mark Matthew, is noticing a significant increase in demand for food and gifts too.
There's been a 45% increase on the same time last year. And so we've had some record days as far as call on our reserves and on our people.
Mr Matthews says they haven't turned anyone away yet, but only have 3 days' worth of supplies left. Marlene Boer, who led the Salvation Army's Christmas drive in Whangarei, says the demand for help has also been strong this year. She says the assistance is a big relief for poor families.
That's the biggest thing that I've seen, is just the relief on people's faces of knowing they didn't have to struggle to try and get presents for their kids, or their kids are actually getting presents this year.
Murray Eldridge from the Wellington City Mission says demand is rising, and it's from unexpected places.
We've seen people come to the mission who have probably more income than traditionally we've seen people with, but because of the costs that they're facing, particularly costs around accommodation, they're just not coping over this period.
New Plymouth's Food Bank manager Sharon Wills says the need for help doesn't stop at Christmas.
it's more of a demand coming into the end of January, into February and then into March once families send kids back to school and they actually get all those bills from Christmas, and that's when it's going to hit us.
For Auckland City Mission, the hard work isn't over yet. On Christmas Day, the charity will serve lunch to more than 700 people. I tamaki makoto mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Katie Scotcher-aho.
Let's return now to our earlier story about the IPCA report into Deputy Police Commissioner Wally Homaha. It found that he had belittled staff members, acted unprofessionally and inappropriately, and had indulged in bullying in a colloquial sense. We interviewed the Commissioner, Mike Bush, about that report earlier in the program. We've had a ton of feedback, so let's plough through some of it. This from Steph, who says Mike Bush is doing a bloody terrible job of responding to the questions and showing he's prepared to take specific action. What type of leadership is being shown at New Zealand Police? Poor leadership, says Steph. A sad day for the rest of the good people in the New Zealand Police. This person says, I thought you were interviewing the male version of Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I feel very sorry for the Commissioner of Police, as he's clearly been told he is keeping Homaha. A ridiculous situation, as anyone in any profession trying to effect a disciplinary investigation in the way Homaha did would almost certainly be dismissed. And this one looks like Radio New Zealand has found the real problem in the police. It's the Commissioner, Mike Bush. What a duplicitous set of statements during the interview, repeated again and again in a sing-song la-la-la tone of ha-ha, none of this matters. Nothing permanent on Wally's employment record? Question mark, exclamation mark. He'd be down the road anywhere else. The PM has to get rid of the dinosaurs running this powerful state organisation, that person says. This from Charlie, who says of Mike Bush, I think he showed himself up as protecting his deputy. He should be dealing with this with more than just talking, he says. And this one, read the Police Commissioner, it is clear that the Commissioner just doesn't get it. His inability to articulate the language in the report demonstrates that he is uncomfortable with it and therefore incapable of addressing it with his deputy. Rob puts it really simply and says, why can't he just answer the questions? And Sandy, far from reassuring the public on the matter of police professionalism and integrity, the interview with Police Commissioner Mike Bush only served to confirm the exact opposite. Thanks, Sandy. And this one from Terence, I think it is. Commissioner Bush in today's broadcast interview was evasive, all in capital letters, in his response to clear questions put to him. Given Homaha's conduct as reviewed, he is clearly unfit to remain a Deputy Commissioner of the New Zealand Police. Appreciate your feedback. Keep it coming. You can get in touch 2101 on the text. In a move which has taken many by surprise, all American troops are being withdrawn from Syria. The President Donald Trump says the 2,000 troops in Syria have succeeded in their mission to defeat Islamic State and are no longer needed. But the decision has been met with disbelief and criticism, much of it from Trump's own Republican Party. The BBC's Barbara Plett-Usher reports from Washington.
Donald Trump promised to withdraw American troops from Syria during his presidential campaign, and he's been looking for a way to do that ever since. Now he's declaring mission accomplished. We have defeated the ISIS militants, he tweeted. They were my only reason for being there. The White House said troops would start to come home. It's true the US and its allies have pretty much expelled IS from its so-called caliphate, the vast swathes of land it once controlled in Iraq and Syria. But even without territory, the militants remain a threat. And Mr. Trump's sudden announcement has upended his administration's strategy to prevent them from making a comeback. Just last week, his chief envoy said the military needed to stay and help stabilize war-torn areas of Syria. I pressed him on that.
So the point is the military commitment doesn't end with the end of the caliphate?
That's absolutely right.
And there's no timeline on it?
No timelines.
The president's top officials had little to say about this sudden about-face, no details about a timeline. But senators from his party were quick to criticize.
The decision to withdraw an American presence in Syria is a colossal, in my mind, mistake, a grave error that's going to have significant repercussions in the years and months to come.
ISIS is not defeated in Syria and Iraq. I was there just a few months ago. They've been incredibly hurt, and our troops there are an insurance policy against the reemergence of ISIS in Syria and Iraq.
And that's not all. A U.S. pullout could endanger its local Kurdish allies. They've been leading the fight against the Islamic State group, but Turkey sees them as terrorists and has threatened to attack them. A withdrawal would also strengthen Russia and Iran's influence in Syria, when U.S. policy is to weaken it.
It seems the president made this decision without considered consultation with those who'd have to carry it out. So the Pentagon and State Department are scrambling to figure out how they can fit this into their Syria strategy. It's not clear what actually is going to happen. What is clear is that this is another example of President Trump's disruptive and disorienting approach to policy.
On November the 27th, 2018, RNZ broadcast and published a story that New Zealand's government was investigating allegations in relation to the shareholdings of the Premier of the Government of Niue, the Honourable Sir Toke Talangi, in his country's state-owned enterprises. There were further serious allegations of illegality and unlawfulness on the part of the Premier made by an MP of the Niue Assembly. Since the article's publication, RNZ has learnt that New Zealand's government is not carrying out an investigation into Sir Toke's shareholdings in Niue state-owned enterprises. Furthermore, the MP's allegations of illegality and unlawfulness have been found to be baseless. In particular, the Premier has confirmed, and RNZ accepts, that the Premier and the other shareholding ministers all entered into declarations of trust for all their shareholdings in Niue's state-owned enterprises at the time they acquired those shareholdings, expressly declaring that they were held on trust for the government of Niue. The delays in completion of the audits of the SOEs were not because of the Premier being the shareholder in those SOEs. RNZ regrets these serious errors and offers a sincere and unreserved apology to Sir Toke and his family.
In what might be an ironic twist, inmates at the country's toughest jail are sprucing up bikes for needy children this Christmas. About 20 bikes destined for children in care in Manurewa have been given a facelift by inmates at Auckland Prison at Paremoremo over the last few weeks. Our reporter Katie Doyle went into jail to take a look.
Christmas is a hectic time for most New Zealanders, and it's no different behind the bars of the prison at Paremoremo. Inmates are hurriedly working to refurbish bicycles in the workshop. Most are either donated or picked up from dumps. Corrections recycling instructor Nicholas Bosworth explains what happens next.
The bikes come in usually in a really bad, disrepairable state and sort of rusty and broken down, so we just normally strip them back down again. I get the guys to strip them back down, repaint things that need repainting, and just break down probably two bikes to make one good bike, so we're actually recycling parts off another bike.
Each bike takes between 1 and 3 days to refurbish, depending on its condition. One inmate, who we'll call John, says his favourite part is the test drives.
I actually quite like doing the smaller bikes, and so it's quite fun for me being quite large, to ride around on the smallest possible bike.
Do you like hooning around?
Yeah.
Once they've passed a safety test, the bikes are donated to charities throughout New Zealand. This Christmas, Corrections is donating 20 bikes to Oranga Tamariki, and AMI Insurance are donating the same number of helmets. They'll end up in the South Auckland suburb of Manurewa, with some of New Zealand's neediest children. The project has been running for 2 years. Another inmate, who we'll call James, has been working it for a large part of that time. He says the idea of playing Santa to a needy child is a real motivator.
As offenders, we've hurt a lot of people, and some of us have hurt children, and to be able to give back, to give something to a child who has nothing, that's a real buzz. It's really awesome to do that.
Do you ever imagine who's going to get the bike that you're working on?
I do, in a sense, because I think when I'm doing a bike, what would the child want? What would the person want? And I want to try and make the bike the best that I can, so that someone will get something that they're going to really love and really enjoy for a long time.
And Oranga Tamariki coordinator Nahi Harding says the children love them.
For a lot of our kids in the area that we work in,
they either don't have bikes, they can't afford bikes, and the financial situation doesn't allow for that to happen. So a lot of these kids that are going to get these bikes will absolutely treasure them.
For some children, these bikes and donated gifts may be the first Christmas presents they've ever received.
Well, if you saw them, you actually saw their faces on the day that they have these Christmas parties, they light up. They're like Christmas trees.
And while the Christmas rush may be about winding down, the inmates say there's still lots of work to do and many more bikes and recipients that need TLC.
Thank you. Takitiamo.
At Pirimurimo for Checkpoint, Katie Doyle.
And if you'd like to donate a bike, you can call Auckland Prison on 09442 6600. That number again, 09442 6600, and they can help sort that out for you. We'll also put that number on our website as well, and you can check out Katie's story on the web too. Thanks for joining us today. Heaps of feedback. Just before you go, one quick last comment. Trish says, PM, please fire both the police commissioner and his deputy. He can't answer a simple question. He's not up to the job. Thanks for joining us.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The country's top police officer says he retains absolute confidence in his second-in-command, Wally Homaha. A report by the Independent Police Conduct Authority found Mr Homaha, the Deputy Commissioner, belittled and humiliated two female staff during a project he led with the Ministries of Justice and Corrections in 2016. It says his behaviour doesn't constitute bullying, and the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, therefore says she's leaving it up to police and its employment procedures. Commissioner Mike Bush told Checkpoint he spoke to Mr Homaha today and outlined his expectations for officers to uphold police values.
I said at Select Committee I did, and I confirm that today. I have absolute confidence. He's been leading a team that have been doing excellent work in terms of ensuring